Thanks everyone for joining us again today. Our guest is Victor Wang. Victor is the CEO of Care.coach. He has led several large awards from Congress via the Department of Defense and National Institute of Health. Victor got his start tinkering with tech at the age of 6, programming role-playing games for MS-DOS. He completed his master's degree at MIT, where he worked on NASA-sponsored human-machine interaction research and a clinical study at Brigham and Women's Hospital. His aging grandmother inspired him to start Care.coach, a company that supports patients and care teams through a unique fusion of human and software intelligence. Now, more interestingly, Care.coach has been named one of the top 5 IT innovations of 2019 by the Health Leaders IT Spending Guide, one of the best healthcare startups to watch in 2020 by Healthcare Weekly, and one of the top aging in place innovations by GuideWell in 2020. So Victor, seems like you guys are getting pretty good industry recognition here. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So, hey, I wanted to talk a little bit about the market you all are sitting in and the thoughts that you had behind starting Care.coach, right? And so it sounds like it was inspired by, experiences that you had with your grandmother. I'd love for you to kind of walk us through the thought process.
Sure.
You had when you said, "Hey, this is something where we see that there's a need."
Sure. The original impetus behind Care.coach was actually the incompetency of AI. So,
Interesting.
growing up in Canada with one of my grandmothers in Taiwan living by herself, because my immediate family all kind of emigrated out of Taiwan when I was a year and a half old. So, we all kind of noticed that she was getting really lonely and she got depressed, and it was really stressful for my mom as her primary remote caregiver. And we would try to set up like Skype, and it'd be challenging to reliably get a video call to connect with her because her computer would have to be turned on and she'd have to go over there and press the right button to answer the call. And eventually we figured out the auto answer feature
Okay.
in Skype, which helped a little bit, but just very challenging to connect with her and really make a difference in her life remotely. And so fast forward to when I was at MIT doing human-machine interaction research and working on NASA's Space Telerobotics program and a clinical trial at Brigham and Women's Hospital about how fatigue affects astronaut telerobotics performance and various interventions like caffeine and blue light.
Mm-hmm.
And then and just finishing up my graduate research and trying to figure out what kind of company to start to make a difference in the world. And I realized that if you could just keep my grandmother company, or people like my grandmother and people like my mom who's trying to provide support for her, there's actually 42 million American family caregivers for an older loved one in presumably pretty similar situations. And a lot of research was being published about this was back in 2012, about how loneliness and social isolation cause increased morbidity and mortality, similar to obesity, diabetes, smoking, and of course increases healthcare costs as a result. So I thought, oh, okay, so that's interesting. There's a lot of clinical and business potential here if we could solve senior loneliness. But AI is not really good enough. Like, I'm not just gonna give an iPhone to grandma and be like, okay, Siri has solved conversational automation. No need to be lonely anymore. So, AI even at the time could do a decent job of helping people like you and me here on this podcast to send a text message without having to pull out your phone, or something simple like that that's structured and just kind of following commands. But then to really build a friendship and provide psychosocial support and have open domain, free form type conversations, and even just to interpret the natural responses of somebody who is trying to follow along to something structured, the tech just wasn't there and still is not there. And so we realized we needed real people to start actually doing this at scale. And fortunately enough, there was also the rise of these online work platforms
Mm-hmm.
that have gotten even more popular because of COVID. So, what we ended up putting together was a global workforce and matching that global workforce to individuals here, primarily in the US, who can benefit from that additional psychosocial support. And and we happen to do that through an avatar to help solve the problem of the fact that you can have Alexa or something like that there 24/7, and even though its intelligence level is very limited and its empathy and conversational abilities are highly limited, at the very least there's a consistency of presence
Mm-hmm.
and a consistency of persona 24/7 for longitudinal timescales. But if you put together a global workforce to increase empathy and increase conversational ability, and you want the equivalent 24/7 availability, longitudinal availability, you end up with a bunch of different people.
Mm-hmm.
Monday morning, Thursday at 2 a.m., Friday night, it's very likely going to be different people. And you get this fragmentation of the user experience, which is a key problem of the US healthcare system.
Okay.
So we solve that through an avatar. And then the company's evolved because of the data that we collect and the automation and the AI that we can develop using that data.
So that's interesting, right? I guess to me, it sounds like what you're saying is one way to solve the problem is to have a global workforce and have an individual within that global workforce connect with the aging adult, right? But the issue there is the constant turnover. There's kind of no way to develop a relationship or continuity, which creates a challenge. So then with an avatar, right, in machine learning algorithms in the background, you're able to learn something that solves that continuity issue. It provides some sense of familiarity to the aging adult in ongoing interactions throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year.
Mhm. And then we make it look like a little talking dog or cat because we're trying to
Oh,
build a fun, non-judgmental type of a relationship. So if anybody's interested, you can go to Care.coach and just check out the video on the front page of our website. Whatever you do, don't add a .com, by the way. It's .coach is the TLD. But yeah, you can see how it works. It's a little talking dog or cat, and so people end up telling their avatar all sorts of things that normally they would have kind of a conscious or subconscious barrier to mentioning. Like people will wake up their little dog avatar and be like, "Hey, buddy, just stay with me for a while. I'm kind of shaken up, but I think I'll be okay. I fell in the shower and my leg doesn't look too good. Don't worry, I think I'll be okay. Just stay with me for a while so I can make sure I'll be okay.
mm-hmm.
But don't tell my daughter because she's gonna put me in a nursing home."
uh,
This is actually like something.
these are real conversations.
This is a real conversation. So that's like something that's more like intentional that they certainly wouldn't want to tell their normal care team, but they'll tell their avatar. And then, by the way, like we're obligated to actually break their trust to help them. And like we will tell the care team because it's important that they know that this is happening, and then we can get them on some strength and balance exercises and help maintain their independence and safety in their home. And it affects kind of the risk level and the payment levels that the health plan gets, for
Mm-hmm.
example. But so we have to actually kind of escalate that and break their trust a little bit. But then another interesting thing happens, which is when the care coordinator calls in and says, "Hey, I heard you're having these falls," like, and they help get them on, let's say, the strength and balance exercise program to help reduce the risks, or send somebody in to help make sure the home is tidied up and the carpets are taped down and there's no like tripping hazards and stuff like that. And that's kind of taken care of. But then, the individuals be like, "Hey, buddy, like, you told on me. And then and actually that's something that, you know, this person might have held a grudge against his daughter for quite some time, or held a grudge against you know, whoever for quite some time. But with the avatar, the little dog just goes like, I'm sorry, I
And
love
they
you, i'm
very
just
interesting.
i'm just trying to help. And then they're like, ah, man, how can I
Okay,
how
but
can I
like
hold
I
a grudge
forgive
against
you.
you? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's just a
yeah.
little, it's just a little kitten, or like a little puppy, right? And then yeah, and we just rebuild that relationship and go from there. And you know, next time something happens, we might have to do something they don't like, but that is in their best interest. And
Yeah,
it's just a much more lighthearted, forgiving, non-judgmental type of a relationship.
for sure.
And then even like less consciously, things will pop up too, because the type of relationship we're able to build is like a real family, like natural relationship, where like, you know, we check in, we wake up and just say like, hey, what's that show you're watching?
Hmm.
And we have a chat about Seinfeld and some funny joke they heard, or like, you know, they'll just casually wake us up in the morning and wish the avatar good morning, and you know, talk about their plans for the day, or their worries about their health, or all sorts of things. Or we'll pray with each other in the evenings. And so a lot of things kind of naturally pop up
Okay.
that the traditional healthcare system would not know about, and isn't necessarily like held back consciously like in the other example, but might be something like, we'll just be having a casual conversation through the avatar with this person. They might say like, oh, I'm sweltering, I don't know what I'm going to do, I can't afford to fix my air conditioning unit, guess I'm just going to try to distract myself with this TV
Hmm.
show. I hope everything will be okay. And then we'll let their health plan know.
Right, right, right.
And they'll actually, under like it's called a capitated or like full risk bearing system, like the health plan will actually send somebody in to fix the air conditioning unit for $200
Okay.
to avoid a $2,000 emergency department visit for heat exhaustion for
Yeah.
like a frail elderly individual. So that kind of thing.
So this is very interesting, and what it makes me think about is right. There are all these types of conversations that happen. On the back end, you have to have someone who, in my mind, someone who is determining which things are important that we need to respond to, which ones aren't. Are you doing that with humans on the back end, or are you doing that with algorithms? Is it a combination of both, where you have an algorithm that's bubbling up the things that are most important that a human should then
Mm-hmm.
respond to? How does that work?
Yeah, so we started out for a few years actually just doing humans doing everything freeform, real time, and then like typing back responses for the avatar to speak in real time. And that was it. I mean, that was when all we cared about was solving loneliness. And then we actually did academic research and published papers with organizations like University of Washington, Pace University, and their nursing group. And we succeeded and could reduce loneliness using things like the UCLA loneliness scale. We actually measured reductions in felt loneliness just by having these free-form conversations. And then we realized that this is the missing piece in the US healthcare system. Like, it's not really a problem of knowing who has heart failure and diabetes and COPD and hypertension and depression and falls risk in the home. Sometimes it is, and you know, you have to kind of get them diagnosed with this risk factor or chronic condition. But for the most part, that's pretty straightforward to do. And the self-management plans for each of these things, while complex, are well understood. The key problem in healthcare in the US is that, generally the top 5% of the population accounts for 50% of all healthcare costs. So it's
Hmm.
not like costs are evenly distributed across, you know, which is not surprising in general, probably because, you know, the Pareto principle of like top, you know, 20% accounts for 80%.
Oh, okay. What you're saying is
So
5% of the population accounts for, you know,
about 50% of all
about fifty
healthcare
percent. Not
costs.
okay. I mean, in
Yeah.
my mind, I was thinking you were saying the top five in terms of income, but it's just 5%.
This is the opposite, is the 1% in healthcare costs. A lot of the time, these are people who are like, you know, because of anxiety, calling 911 all the time. They have some underlying health conditions, but
Okay.
they can be self-managed if they were properly supported and diligent about it every day. But because it's very challenging to manage, like each chronic condition has maybe a dozen different really important things that you have to keep track of every day of your life for the rest of
Mhm.
your life. And then when you're looking at like a 70-something-year-old person who's in the top tier of healthcare risk and cost, uh, they'll have multiple chronic conditions, like not
Mhm.
just diabetes, not just COPD, but like diabetes plus COPD plus heart failure, plus they're lonely and they have depression and they're inadequately supported by family members, plus maybe they are low income, low healthcare literacy, kind of
Mhm.
education level. And so you might know that they have these conditions and they might have even seen their doctor and been given a self-care plan with a ton of different things they're expected to do every day for the rest of their lives. So up till there, it's not really uh, a problem, other than the fact that, maybe if they lived a healthier life decades earlier, that some of these chronic conditions could have been avoided. But other than that, the problem is now that they have this complex plan of care, it's very difficult to actually motivate somebody to care enough to adhere to their care plan and then adhere
Right.
to their care plan. Because like if you ask somebody like, hey Darius, what's important to you in your life, like the answer is usually not managing my diabetic A1C or like taking my medications on time. Like there's some other like deeper personal thing that people care about, and all the dozens of different things they have to do to manage their chronic conditions every day just kind of play into that. But it takes a lot of human effort and empathy and conversational ability to build up that relationship and get to know the person and
Yeah.
support them day to day enough that they first care about their complex plan of care, and then actually kind of everybody talks about like medication reminders, but it's actually not usually the case that the root cause is forgetting.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Right.
not really about just like, oh, just remind everybody about the 20 different things they have to do every day and you've solved healthcare. There's a lot of just personal support and encouragement that's required. So we realized at that point that that's the problem that we're solving, and that actually we could layer on top of these relationships that we're building that originally we did for the purposes of solving senior loneliness. But now that we had this foundation, we could layer on an expert system in software to guide our workforce globally, to not just have these psychosocially supportive conversations, but also coach people on top of these relationships to then manage their chronic condition, with the key differentiator being, instead of like all these other digital health solutions or like some chatbot or like IVR automated phone calls,
Mhm.
these are all great. And then by and large, everybody has the same clinical protocols and healthcare type of escalations and things like that. But we have the powerful psychosocial relationship
Right.
as a foundation. So we built an expert system, and over the years embedded into it all the common protocols for how to coach all the common chronic conditions, especially among an older adult population. Everything that we talked about,
Yeah.
including like falls risk in the home and so on.
Have you also layered in kind of that? And you mentioned expert systems. Have you layered in that machine learning piece to where it
Yep.
continues to learn
And
from all of the conversations, right? Where you don't need to go in and hard code more of
yeah,
the.
so then that's the epitome of what we did. So we did solve loneliness for a few years, and then solve self-management of health risks for a few years. And then while doing so, we've been recording all the data
Right. Right.
in both unstructured and structured form, like the audio, video, unstructured data, and kind of summaries of what they talked about, and then also very structured data of like, this was a specific protocol, like for example an afternoon medication reminder, and the avatar said, uh, have you taken your afternoon medications? And the person said yes, or the person said no, or they said no but they will later, or they said Yes, but they're only taking half doses because they're trying to make their bottle last as long as possible because they're not supposed to leave the house that much to go get the
Mhm.
refill, and they don't know how else to get the refill. So so we've been getting truly natural responses from our patient population to all of this prompting. And so we used all that training data to build our own machine learning based models to recognize what people are saying and classify what people are saying.
Yeah.
and and you probably understand the uniqueness of our data set at this point. It's not
Mhm.
like the data sets that Google or Amazon or whoever has, where um, it's kind of like a general consumer population, and they know that
Right.
they're talking to a pretty limited intelligence, so they'll talk a certain way, and the industry calls that natural language processing. but we're getting true natural language because they're praying with their avatar, they're venting their frustrations with their avatar, they're joking around with their avatar. So when their avatar says, are you ready for your shoulder roll exercise, or how are you doing, or did you take your morning medications, they give a truly natural response. So
Right.
nobody else has that kind of data. And so and then even just something as fundamental as understanding what an older person is saying, like word for word, voice recognition engines, their word error rate drops with age because, I mean, it's no surprise if you think about it. I mean, it's the same fundamental problem as why people are complaining about like ethnic bias in
Mhm.
facial recognition algorithms. It's where is the training data from? So, naturally, the big tech ASR systems don't work as well for, people of advanced age because those
Right.
aren't the people training.
That's
But
actually the big question I have, right? Like, because to your point, if you're training on any, I'll just call it a random training data, but something that's semi-relevant, it's not, it's not exactly what someone in your user base would be talking about. So your accuracy in terms of, in your ability to
Mhm.
have really unique conversations, um, you'd be challenged there. And on top of that, you guys are going a step further in having conversations that someone generally would not have with a family member, someone who they feel like may judge them, right? So these are kind of more intimate. So you have different question or answer response type conversations than you would in, anything that you could get from human to human conversations, or any other type of conversation. So I'm actually curious about, then, you guys have, you're working with the, and correct me if I'm wrong here, with the kind of the Department of Defense, that I, if I'm in
That's where our congressional award
the
came
awards came
through.
from.
We're working with the VA on that one.
Okay. So I'm curious. Well, I'm thinking about the folks who are actually, paying for the product. How do you initially, work your way into asking them, hey, look, we have this thing that we think would be very valuable. Would love to work with you. And maybe it's insurance companies, maybe it's
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, that's how we started. So, we started by solving the human problem of just how do you actually build a powerful, lasting relationship with this
Mhm.
target population that's very challenging to engage through technology and really needs that psychosocial support. So we solved that, and I learned this after the fact. Probably should have thought more about the business to start off, but then after we solved the human problem, then we figured out the business problem. So now at this point, we have many health plan customers across the country that see ROI in various ways, but primarily for the past several years, it's been through reducing healthcare costs because people take care of themselves better, so they
Mhm.
require less, for example, nurse visits to the home, and they call 911 less, so they use
Mm.
less emergency department resources, which are extremely expensive for the health plan. So the health plans just pay for our service. They are
Yeah.
our customers. And then more recently, we expanded also into Medicare Advantage, which is a type of health plan where the government ranks the health plans on their quality measures in the same way that you might look at various restaurants on Yelp and pick the one with the highest star rating
Yeah.
when people hit retirement age in the US and they enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan. they very often just pick the one in their area that has the highest rating. And so the quality ratings are
Yeah.
extremely important. And if you can bump up member satisfaction and other measures that factor into that star rating, like medication adherence, maintaining physical health, improving mental health, which we do, and we have evidence for at this point that's published, then you can not only directly save costs by like reducing nurse visits to the home required, reducing emergency department visits, but also you can bump up your star rating on your plan and have more people enroll in your plan.
Mm-hmm.
And you also get bonus payments for quality. And so we're able to bump up top line. So that's the
Yeah.
business case and the ROI for our health plan customers. So that was what we did for the next few years.
Yeah. But
And
how do
and
you
we're
even work your way into that conversation, right? Like you at some point you have zero customers and you got to get number one.
well, I mean, you spend a few years of your life, and and you publish some clinical research with some reputable academic partners, because generally the big healthcare companies require clinical evidence.
Okay.
There's so many startups that want their business, like they won't really consider you seriously unless you have evidence backing up your claims for driving outcomes. Unless you're like just a purely like non-healthcare, you have like no real healthcare claims, or you're some widget in the EMR that helps the providers to get something done. Like obviously, for something like that, you might not need clinical evidence. But we spent some hard years just kind of building our product and getting clinical evidence and publishing about how we reduced delirium and falls among hospitalized elders by 80+%. That was a Stanford paper that we published. And so on. And then you start doing little kind of phase one deployments, and you start publishing white papers with real
Mm-hmm.
customers that are paying about how you're actually doing this in real life with real customers, and then you keep growing from there. It's a long process in healthcare.
Yeah. That's why I
And
asked. It's not like
you
you
know,
build it and they're
yeah,
like,
I
oh,
mean,
that's
I've
cool.
been doing this for 8 years, so that, I mean, I don't have like a quick and easy answer for you, unfortunately. But at this point, we've done it and we have all the data, so we're at kind of our third stage problem that we're solving, which is the data and the technical problem. So we're kind of coming full circle of, oh, AI is not good enough, so we started with real people to solve the human problem. Then we solved the business problem and started to scale up and get data in real healthcare contexts. And now that we have the data, we're putting into production actual production machine learning models that help automate these conversations in ways that even big tech is not capable of. And we've benchmarked our proprietary models against the off-the-shelf capabilities, for example, in Google Cloud Platform and Azure and AWS, for something as basic as speech recognition for an
Mm-hmm.
older adult population. And we can actually exceed the performance of all of the above. And
Awesome.
we continue to improve as we get more utilization and data. So we're at an exciting place. And the more that we solve the technical problems and automate what traditionally takes our human workforce to do, the more scalable our solution can get. And the lower our costs and the more
Mm-hmm.
people we can help and the more data that we get and the more we can automate. And to my knowledge, nobody else in the world has this kind of data. So we're in an exciting position right now.
Yeah, you're speaking to the true kind of competitive advantage of building an AI product where that unique data set is going to allow you to drive value in a way that no one else is. Now if you were to think back to day one, right? You've been at this for 8 years. You dropped us a couple nuggets throughout the conversation, but if you were to think back to day one, knowing everything you know now, and you can advise yourself on day one, the things you should do, shouldn't do, maybe what advice would you give yourself to start off this business?
I would have started with the difficult problem, which is healthcare. So actually, for a few years, if you summarize what I just described, effectively what we did was stay away from healthcare for the first few years. A lot of people try to stay away from healthcare because it's not easy, and it's going to take forever to get these sales closed, and they're looking for clinical evidence, and you have to spend a bunch of time getting the clinical evidence first, and then the sales cycles are still really long.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, what CPT codes and reimbursement and FDA and like, what is the deal? And it's just not the friendliest industry to get into unless you've had a long, successful career in that industry already and are already a domain expert. So we kind of stayed away from that and stayed really kind of non-medical, non-healthcare. And in retrospect, I would have just tackled the hard problem first, because it's going to take you a few years. So you got to get started as early as possible. And also that's where the value is. Like, people don't pay for their own healthcare in the US, but if you solve real healthcare ROI type problems for the payers, you can prove a lot more value than you can prove to a consumer. Because if you solve loneliness and help a consumer be more healthy, that might mean a lot from a human perspective. But because very few Americans pay for 100% of their healthcare costs, especially the ones that are actually like very complex, expensive members of the healthcare system, generally there's some kind of, whether it's Medicare Advantage, or something like that, there's some kind of payer that's paying for that. So without addressing the healthcare concerns at that level, your business can only capture so much value. It might be delivering all the value, but nobody's measuring it, because from a consumer standpoint, they have no way of measuring that and they don't really see the value. So yeah, I would have tackled the hard problem first.
Okay. Yeah, no, super helpful. And, thanks you for giving us a walkthrough of exactly what you all are doing. I think this is a very special case in the sense that AI is actually improving the quality of life of humans, right? And so you kind of a lot of times hear kind of, okay, well, what's the business case? What's this? What's that? But in your case, there's actually a quality of life of improvement behind what you guys are doing. Can you leave us with your website again?
Yeah, https://care.coach/ and so
what
please visit and get in touch.
Is it anyone in machine learning, or do you look for a specific skill set?
We're doing speech recognition, natural language processing, machine vision, and also just kind of like general machine learning and algorithms.
Okay. Awesome. Well, if anyone there is looking for an opportunity with an exciting company, there you have it.
Cool.
All right,
well, I appreciate the time, Darius.
Yeah, thank you so much, and hope to have you on again soon.
All right.
All right.
Take care. Stay well.
You too.